Did you test my sound? Okay, test, test. Excellent. Michelle, do you want to do your test of your sound? Must not be sitting there.
Well, remember, you're muted on your computer for the meeting. Hi, Michelle and Bernie. Do you guys want to do a test of your sound?
Bernie's not connected yet.
I think Bernie's still connecting, but. Aaron, can you hear me?
I can.
Okay, we can hear you pretty well too, thanks. Michelle, can you hear us here at Town Hall?
She must not be
It's not
by
be
a
at the
computer, and Bernie's still.
Turn up the sound.
Okay. We could hear you pretty well.
You can hear me well?
Yeah.
All right, I'm looking for where it is I turn up the sound here.
Kyle, can you hear us here at Town Hall?
Yeah, I hear you clear. All good. Yep.
We're on. So Chair, we're taping.
Alrighty, we're taping. Let's call to order Town of Basalt Planning and Zoning Commission meeting Tuesday, December 15th, 2020. Roll call vote, please.
Okay, and I show that it's 6:06. Bill Marin,
Yes.
Kyle Oberkaker,
Yes.
Gino Rossetti,
Yes.
Eric Volzek,
Here.
Michelle Tebow,
Yes.
Bernie Grauer,
Here.
Rob Levitt,
Yes.
Cindy Hirschfeld is not present. And just an announcement that Tracy Bennett did send us her resignation because she did sell her home. So we have a quorum.
Alrighty. First order of business, approve the minutes from November 17th, 2020. Does anybody have any changes to make or additions to the record?
I'll make a motion to accept.
All right, we have one motion to approve. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay.
Motion passes unanimously. Well,
Okay.
I didn't hear Bernie, but
Aye.
good, there you go. That, now it's unanimous. Okay, item 3A, public hearing on the Forkfront Basalt LLC application. James.
Yes, thank you. Let me share my screen here. Okay, can everybody see it?
Yes.
Okay. This is a public hearing on an application submitted by Forkfront LLC. They're requesting a sketch plan PUD amendment, sketch site plan, ESA review, ESA floodplain reach 2, to construct a 100% residential building on Lot J of the Basalt Commercial Park subdivision in PUD. As you can see here, here's the subject site. This is Emma Road, coming down past the Roaring Fork Apartments, which is right here. Also Basalt Stores right here. And then Emma Road coming down past the Basalt River Lofts building. And then here's the subject site where my cursor is. It's Lot J. And so the subject site contains 12,000 square feet. It's at the end of Emma Road, and as I indicated, it's just east of the Basalt River Lofts. PUD currently permits a mixed-use building with commercial on the first floor and residential on the upper floors. The proposal is to construct a 100% residential building of 12 units on the site, as well as to amend the PUD to allow for a building height of 33 feet instead of the 30-foot that is currently in the PUD for the site. The building is proposed to be, I'm sorry, Gino? No, the PUD currently permits commercial on the first floor and residential on the upper floor. And they're requesting to amend the PUD specifically for this lot to allow for a 100% residential building. Of the 12 units that are proposed, 3 are proposed as affordable housing units, and I'll show you the floor plans. All of the affordable housing units are proposed to be 2-bedroom units, and there's 1 that's proposed on each floor. All of the units are proposed to be Category 2 deed-restricted affordable housing units. The review process, as I mentioned, is a sketch plan review. The applicants chose to split it into a sketch and final plan review in order to get an understanding of whether the concept is generally acceptable before going to the expense and time of having final civil engineering drawings done, as well as hydrological analysis and modeling that is needed for the final ESA review. So there'll be 2 rounds of review with the P&Z and council, this being the sketch plan and first round of review. In reviewing the application, staff identified a series of discussion items that are in your staff memo, and I've got the most significant ones here up on the screen that staff has identified. The first being consistency with the master plan. It's identified as mixed-use commercial on the future land use map, but the master plan identifies a density range allowance of up to 12 units for the site, and it also discusses this as being a good place for residential in a quarter mile from transit, as well as close to services. And you can see that here on the map subject site. Here is the Basalt Avenue BRT station in this area right here, and there's sidewalk and path to get there. And then there's also services, it's close to town. This is River Park Center that has restaurants as well as office space in it, medical office space. And then they also have Basalt Store that's there in close proximity. As I noted, there's also 2 PUD amendment requests that are being made. The first is a use adjustment to permit a 100% residential project instead of the mixed-use project on the site. And then the second is to increase the building height allowance from 30 feet to 33 feet for this specific property. In evaluating those requests, staff is accepting of the amendment to permit the 100% residential, as there is a significant need for rental housing in the Mid-Valley. On a weekly basis, staff hears from employers that are trying to hire but are having trouble finding rental housing for their employees. And as we mentioned, it's near BRT as well as services of downtown. The building height request, as I mentioned, they're asking to change the PUD to increase the allowable height by 3 feet. 1.5 feet of that is proposed for a parapet to screen the PV panels that are proposed on the site. The other 1.5 feet is to make the units more livable. And, you know, as some background, the neighboring Basalt River Lofts was held to a 30-foot height limit, but the solar panels that they have were allowed to extend above that height limit, as is permitted by the town code. Staff believes that the parapet to screen the appurtenances on the roof is consistent with the design guidelines in the Basalt Commercial Park PUD. And that the height would be consistent with the underlying C3 zoning. The applicants have provided some photo simulations that are in your packet, and they're included here on the screen. They can go through those photo simulations in more detail as part of their applicant presentation. But generally, there's conditions in the draft conditions that would allow for the approval of the 33 feet. It's condition number 3. If the P&Z, however, is not comfortable going to the 33 feet, you could go with the alternative condition number 3, which would approve of the residential change, but not allow for the height increase. Other discussion items include access and parking. The access to the site is from Emma Road. And Emma Road is a private road that's maintained by the HOA, as was established in the original PUD approvals. Lot J was allocated 17 parking spaces in the original platting of the subdivision, but the 12 units that are proposed would require 26 parking spaces. The applicants worked out a site layout that would include the 26 parking spaces that are required, while preserving a significant ponderosa tree which is located down here that staff asked them to preserve. However, today, staff and the applicants were made aware that some of the owners of the Basalt River Lofts building, which is located right here where my cursor is, had some concerns about the proposal for parking and the proposal to extend parking for Lot J in front of their building, which is part of the proposal. So staff is ultimately going to recommend that the P&Z continue the public hearing to January instead of take an action on it to see if the applicant and Basalt River Lofts, as well as staff, can try to resolve the Basalt River Lofts concerns related to parking. But we'd like to continue to go through the other discussion items here. Affordable housing mitigation is one of the other discussion items. As I noted, there are 3 affordable housing units proposed. Let me go to the floor plans. They're the units in pink here on your floor plans. They're all proposed as 2-bedroom units. They're proposed to be Category 2 rental units that would be for rent by people and families making at most 100% of the area median income and working at least 1,500 hours per year between Aspen and Glenwood. They meet the 25% requirement for mitigation of the units, as well as the 3 affordable housing units also meet the square footage requirement of providing deed-restricted housing for 25% of the square footage. The applicants did add some exterior storage closets per the staff and homeowners association recommendations to provide some storage exterior to the units. The Basalt Affordable Community Housing Committee, BAC, reviewed the affordable housing units and felt that they met the livability guidelines that are in the town's community housing guidelines. And staff has provided a condition that they provide draft deed restrictions as part of the final plan application for evaluation. Other discussion items for the sketch plan review include the environmental and green aspects of the development. They're required to meet the town's sustainable building regulations, the SBR requirements, and they're proposing to provide solar to meet the renewable energy requirements of the SBR. Additionally, they're required to meet the wildfire mitigation requirements that were recently adopted by the town that P&Z and Town Council reviewed. And there have requirements in the draft conditions that they show how they're going to satisfy the SBR requirements as part of the final plan application, as well as to demonstrate compliance with the wildfire mitigation requirements as part of the final plan. In terms of referral comments that have been received, we received referral comments from the Fire District, the Basalt Sanitation District, as well as verbal comments from RAFTA, as well as the school district. The Fire District felt that they had acceptable access and that they needed a fire hydrant, which is included in the plans. The Fire District also recommended that the type of trees that were proposed on the fire turnaround, which is located right here, should be evaluated to look at another type of tree that didn't have as much height to it, because they are proposing to serve the building by pulling their aerial fire engine here and then laddering onto the roof. So they need lower trees in this area. So we've got a condition that they adjust that prior to final plan review. In terms of the Basalt Sanitation District's comments, they indicated that they need more detail before going into final plan review, and that they would need a variance from the Sanitation District Board for having shared sewer service lines to the building. That's a variance that has been reviewed by the Sanitation District Board on other projects and been granted in the past for rental. So we've got a condition that they would need to go to the Sand District Board prior to final review to try and get that variance. RAFTA, in their comments, which were verbal comments, indicated that this project should contribute to first and last mile improvements to get people to transit. And so there's been conditions included in the draft requirements that would require the applicant to pay towards bike and car share, as was required of other projects, including the 525 Basalt Avenue project that was reviewed in the last year or so. And then the school district also provided comments requiring that the applicant pay school land dedication fees, and that's been included in the conditions. As I mentioned this evening, staff recommends considering applicant comments, taking public comments, and then providing P&Z discussion. And then after the P&Z discussion, staff would recommend continuing the public hearing to January 5th to see if there are parking alternatives that can be worked out to kind of address the parking concerns of the neighboring Basalt River Loft residents. So with that, this evening, I would stop sharing my screen. We have the applicants with us. We have Aaron Ward, who represents the applicant group, and his representatives, Jeff Dahl, and I think Ramsey Fulton is with Jeff as well.
I was just informed we're having some technical difficulties. So we're going to get through that presentation, but apparently Ramsey's, who is the presenter and lead architect, is unable to access through the links, but he's able to call in, and so we're going to try to get through it.
Okay.
All right, so I don't know if Ramsey is even able to call in, so
Just let me check the attendees. Yeah, it looks like I need to promote him here. Just a minute.
oh, okay, I see him.
Okay, there we go. Ramsey, can you hear us?
He's on mute.
Let me see if I can unmute him too. Yeah, there we
Looks
go.
like I'm unmuted, guys. Thank you.
There we go.
Thanks, you guys. So Jeff, I'm gonna have Jeff run the PowerPoint presentation from his computer, and I'm gonna help him guide through that process. First of all, I just want to apologize. We have a little technical difficulties as we're getting started here. I realized the web link wasn't working, and I had to sort of shift to my phone, and I've got some notes in front of me, and I'm just going to run through it verbally with you guys while Jeff leads the discussion. Jeff, do you want to open up the PowerPoints? We can do it slide by slide, please.
Yep, can everybody see my screen?
I see the PowerPoint, not the present. If you go to the bottom right, there's a presentation mode.
Yeah, let's see.
Okay, I guess that's the toggling mode. Go back to the first slide, please.
Hang on.
Almost there. Okay, perfect. So yeah, without further ado, introduce myself. I'm Ramsey Fulton with Building Seed Architects. With me today is Jeff Dahl, who's the project manager for this, and Aaron Ward is the developer and owner of Lot J. So thanks for having us. Jeff, next slide. So I wanted to start out by giving some good context to the project in the town of Basalt. You can see there where Highway 82 is and the Roaring Fork River. Basically, this area that's kind of beyond Stubby's there is the Basalt Commercial Park. And the main thing to point out with this overview, where you can see a lot of context, is that we do have a really good access to walkable distance to downtown across the footbridge that's right about the roundabout, as well as good access to the stores and shops that are over by the gas station and that development there. Next slide. So zooming in a little bit, you can now see that we do have a really good proximity to the Rafta bus station that was recently put in. It's beautiful there on the corner of 82. And it's sort of an ideal location for a transit-oriented housing development here, which is what we're shooting for. You can also see the 56-unit Roaring Fork Apartments, as well as the 4 units of Salt River Lofts adjacent to us. I mean, one of the takeaways from this slide is, we really feel like the transit-oriented first and last mile aspect of this is going to lessen the parking and traffic needs in this area. And go ahead and go to the next slide. So this little drawing here shows basically the footprint of the site, not the building. And right here, you start to really see some of the advantages of this site, as well as some of the constraints. One of the greatest advantages we have is right behind us. On the north side, you can see it opens up to a forested, wooded area. And then beyond that, there's a Ponderosa Trail and the Roaring Fork River. Whereas in opposition to the other side of us, we kind of have the main access drive and the roar of the Highway 82, which actually coincides with where most of the solar heat gain would be hitting our building. I think it's interesting to note that one of the other uniquisms is that east face is also a great aspect. And we really only have one side with a neighbor, so it's 3 sides that's sort of open to view and opportunities that doesn't have to do with a neighboring property. And then obviously right next to us, you can see the Basalt River Lofts, which is roughly about 65 feet away from our building envelope. Next slide. So zooming in a little bit here, now you can see some of those great opportunities of nature that are right adjacent to this 12-unit development we're proposing. We have this wonderful wooded area and then the Ponderosa Trail beyond that, which in this picture you can see is just under construction and finishing up now. And then obviously being next to the river there on the bank, it's a great opportunity for people to have a great quality of life in that area. Next slide. Here you can see some fall shots we've taken from on this property, and obviously those great, wonderful cottonwood trees in their full color, growing to about 60 to 70 feet, none of those trees are on our property, so none of those trees would necessarily have to be removed in this development, which is something that really makes us excited about. Go ahead and go to the next one. So then just to give this a little bit further context, this is the Basalt River Lofts building on the left-hand side. You can see Harry Teague's office and the lease cycle e-car there, just to kind of give you an idea of how our frontage side looks. And we did align our front of building along the same line as the Basalt River Lofts there, which we think creates a nice streetscape. Go ahead and go to the next slide. So this kind of shows, looking back the opposite direction at Salt River Lofts, and there you can kind of see the massing of the building, roughly 30 feet tall with panels above going to about 35 feet. You can see the beautiful forest that stretches behind them as well, and sort of the view of where our frontage of our building would be looking back towards the Salt River Lofts. Next slide. So now here's our proposed design, which we're pretty proud of. Just one of the very early themes that we discovered here have to do a lot to do with the site that we studied there, that you saw the images of, where we have this juxtaposition between the roar of the highway and Highway 82, and on the backside we have this beautiful nature scene with a forest and a river and beautiful mountains beyond, and protected from that noise corridor. So obviously, because of that reason, and also with the west facing aspect of the frontage of this building, we wanted to really open the windows up to the back and sort of have smaller windows but appropriately sized and sort of detailed windows on the front side. And you can go to the next slide, Jeff. And so on this back side, you can now see opening up to the forest, those big decks and balconies and large expansions of glass to kind of invite people into the natural environment and really, kind of create a wonderful setting for them. Go ahead and go to the next slide. And then, here's some street views of the building. The top left is sort of just passing the Basalt River Lofts, and the bottom left is obviously looking back the other way. And then there's a couple other views there. But one of the things we want to iterate here is that, we really did try to break down the massing of this building, both vertically and horizontally, and introduce warming and durable materials. So by breaking down the massing, one of the things we did was create a break in material right at about the first floor height, which kind of gives a residential and human scale of the building. And then also with those playful screened areas at the stair cores, we were able to break up the mass. And also where we felt like it was getting a little bit too long, we introduced a towering element there towards the end on the right of that top image, the white element there. So we really did what we could to sort of have a density building that promotes a lot of units and affordable units, but also sort of break it down and articulate it nicely. The last thing to mention on the building design here would be, we really did make a conscious effort to respect the Basalt River Lofts architectural style. I used to work for Harry. I have a lot of respect for his architecture, and we wanted to create a contemporary building that played tribute to that and was fitting in the neighborhood. Go ahead and go to the next slide. So then on this slide, now here's the site plan, the architectural site plan that is. And so the first thing you'll notice in this architectural site plan is obviously the solar panels on the rooftop. Obviously we have a great opportunity with this flat roof and with the parapet to go high enough just to cover the solar panels to really harness a lot of energy and offset the electrical demand. Another thing you'll notice here is that the building of the Basalt River Lofts and our structure are well aligned with frontage that sort of create that streetscape. And then obviously because of where the noise is in the highway, we did put the parking on that southwest face and stretching further down to the right. Whereas between the two buildings, that 65-foot area is an area that we really wanted to make sure was detailed correctly. And we've been working with Picken County on that drive there, which was originally envisioned to be a plaza and now is a emergency access drive that's sort of doubling as a plaza. So what you really have there is you kind of have an outdoor plaza area on the Basalt River Lofts side. You have an emergency access area, and then some trees and some breaking up of that long mass, and then another plaza on our side. So it's really sort of a filtering of objects there that we think worked out really well. And we worked really hard to integrate our design with that of the needs of the emergency access so that it's kind of seamlessly developed here at the end of the block. I guess go ahead to the next slide. Now we're on the floor plans, and this is the first floor plan, but most of the floor plans are fairly similar. The first thing to point out here, I think, would be that we have 3 floors of 4 units, and 3 of those 4 units on each floor are 2 bedrooms. 2 of those are 2.5 baths. One is a 2 bath, and on each floor we have 1 deed restricted affordable unit, which we feel like is an appropriate move to kind of make sure that the quality in different environments of 3 floors is well distributed for those who are in the deed restricted affordable units. And another thing to note there is that deed restricted unit is much larger in square footage than what the requirements were. We were really trying to hit a quality level here and not just do the bare minimum. Another thing you'll notice in the floor plan view here is that we do have nice open living areas. We're intending to have 9-foot ceilings, which really let a lot of daylight in and sort of have the main living spaces opening up to the back of the lot where all that opportunity for nature is. Would also point out that if you look at kind of how the bedrooms are situated and the bathrooms, you'll notice that the 2 bedrooms each have an ensuite primary, bedroom and a secondary full bath, which is a really ideal environment for the situation where you have a roommate for younger people or people that aren't in the same family living in the same space. I'll also mention that 75% of these are 2 bedrooms, 2 bath, which is a recognized void in the community and something that we need more of. And 25% is going to be the 1 bed, 1 bath, which is really a fully equipped unit with washer and dryer, highly efficient, and then also in a high demand, that project type. On the first floor, we'll also mention that this whole level is also type B units, which means it's accessible ready. So speaking to inclusive living, we made the full first floor ready for a wheelchair sort of accessible development. So if you go to the next slide, we'll look at the second and third floor. They're really the same, so we can toggle to whichever one we want right now. But once again, the opportunities of the decks and the balconies off to the back side is sort of an important element. Good quality finishes throughout. We're proposing to have Caesar stone or stone countertops and wood floors and can lighting and nice high ceilings. So we're trying to do this thing right and create some quality product in the Basalt area. The last thing to really point out in the floor plans would probably be what James already mentioned, and that would be the addition of the gear garages or the gear storage areas that the town of Basalt emphasized, and we sort of incorporated, and now there certainly is no unused and underutilized section of this floor plan. Go to the next slide. I guess the next one then, because that was just the third floor. Okay. So now, I want to take a break from looking at our plans and looking at the site and talk about the planning elements that are emphasized by the master plan of Basalt. And sort of, also note that we really did pay attention to this document. We used it as a guide and sort of tried to make sure that our development is hitting the intents of that. It's wonderful to work in a community that has a document like this that was so recently prepared that we can cater a design to and really understand the priorities of the community. So go to the next slide. So theme 1, people and community character here. I think where we really hit high marks on this one is the smart growth category. It's definitely an urban infill project. It's within the core of the community where we do want to go ahead and see development, and it achieves a needed housing goal, and it also has the benefit where there's created outdoor space next to us in that plaza area, which I think has high value. Go to the next slide. So theme 2 is affordable, inclusive living, and I think of all the categories, this is the one where we're really shining the most. Aaron pointed out that there's a 1,900 units short of 100 to 120% AMI, according to a 2017 study, and those are getting worse, projected out to 2017. So I think hitting a 12 unit and sort of maximizing the potential of unit count and quality units in this development really helps with this particular goal. And I also want to point out that these are obtainable apartments to help satisfy the housing shortage versus the unobtainable high-end for sale condos, which you so often see developers trying to aim for. We're doing a very different model here. And then again, once again, the 25% of deed restricted affordable housing obviously hits its goal. The 2-bed, 2-bath shortage, that hits this goal. And then of course, when you talk about inclusive living, once again, the type B units or the accessible ready hits the goal. And the last item there would be that we have worked with the Basalt Affordable Community Housing Board on this and have really worked hard to kind of hear their needs and incorporate those. Next slide. So under the category of connected and safe movement and access, obviously you guys have already heard me talk about transit-oriented housing and multi-mode commuting. Obviously there's a lot of great proximity to the community, to schools, to shops, to restaurants. We do have a component of bike parking and have a compact car area there. And we've also, would point out in this theme that the access to the trail, the Ponderosa trail access is another great amenity. It's also in this category that we, our support of the emergency access way for Picken County's kayak park there is also something that's of value. Go to the next slide. Authentic places and destinations. Well, I think this is distinctive architecture. I think it's unique design. I think it's a destination, where being at the end of the Ponderosa Trail there and then the road, it really is a place where you kind of end a journey. And I think having a unique, beautiful architecture in that location is really, really a good thing, and we're happy about it. Next slide. Apart from the affordable and inclusive living, I'd say that this resilience and sustainable environment is the other category where we're really kind of trying to focus our energy on. We have a number of green initiatives going on here. We're satisfying, first of all, the Basalt sustainable building requirements, which has some fairly good and rigorous regulations. The density of housing, housing with a smaller footprint are things that you see pop up in the master plan we're certainly going for. Transit-oriented housing, multi-mode commuting, don't need to hit that again. Reclaimed and recycled post-industrial and post-consumer materials are things we're going to go for. Obviously, the PV rooftop array is a great offset for electrical demands. We're also, towards that end, we're trying to incorporate high-efficiency plumbing and electrical fixtures in this project, LED mainly. And then the big one here is localized mechanical and high-efficiency HVAC systems. So with the solar tempered design, where we're blocking the heat and paired with air-to-air system heat pumps, we think that we can really create a very efficient building here. And then obviously having a tight footprint and good insulation really gets you pretty far. And then next slide. Maintainable civic and community services. Well, this one doesn't have a huge applicability to us, but I will point out, that once again, we've been supportive and integrative of the kayak emergency rescue needs there, and are working with them to integrate our project into their project, landscaping, and hearing out what they need for their turnarounds and what have you. And then, of course, the Roaring Fork Fire Rescue Authority recommendations have been included and considered. Next slide. Workplace workers and economy. This is a workforce housing development, really. I mean, quality and affordable for professionals and tourism industry employees, with the benefit of a lifestyle that has access to nature, which is super important to us. Next slide. So then the final one of the master plan has to do with regional growth and annexation. Obviously, in the master plan, this lot was identified as a key parcel where it was supported to have from 3 to 12 units. We feel like going along with some of the other themes for the lack in housing, affordable housing goal of hitting 500 units in the next few years that you read in the master plan, we're trying to get there by doing this development, and the little raise in height we're going for that stays well within the underlying zoning really helps us get that goal and do it in a quality way. So in a way, I think that's an easy way for P&Z to eliminate barriers as it's written in that section there. So that's the end of our PowerPoint presentation. Next slide. This kind of brings you back around to the front. And I thank you so much, Jeff, for driving this presentation, and I'm glad I was able to get on the call.
Alrighty, Ramsey, thank you. Aaron, do you have anything you want to add to this presentation before I open this up for questions?
No, I think Ramsey did a pretty good job. Just a little background on me. I own a small commercial appraisal firm in Basalt. I live in Basalt. We had a few employees at one point, and the cost of housing became such that our employees are all now remote in Durango and Denver. And so, the need for housing is very apparent to most people who live here, and that's why, just to drive it home, I decided to go the rental, an apartment property rather than a high-end condo project.
All right, thank you. The applicant's presentation is done. I'm going to open this up for questions, but I want to give a brief note for the newer people here about our format for the public hearing. We'll go through commissioner questions of staff and the applicant, then we'll open this up for a public comment, and then we will go back to commissioner comments. So during this question period, try and keep your questions to questions only, and you'll have a chance to do comments later. So
Could you clarify the public comments with regard to the parking situation, James? You said that was going to continue.
Sure. Let me bring my screen back up here just a quick second. So the parking scenario, they would be required by code to have 26 parking spaces. And in the PUD, the way the parking is set up is basically all of the parking is on street for the most part. Throughout the PUD, you'll notice as you're down by the Roaring Fork Apartments, all of that is on street parking. On the Basalt River Lofts building, there are 2 spaces that are located right here. They're parallel parking spaces where my cursor is. This is the Basalt River Lofts building. And so there were another couple spaces that were approved and platted, but were never built. And some of those parking spaces were allocated for the Lot J building itself whenever something is built on Lot J. The applicant was proposing to kind of extend that number of parallel parking spaces further to the west. And you can see it in the inset here. Let me zoom in. So here's Lot J, here's the Basalt River Lofts. 2 of the parking spaces were originally for general parking, and then in the PUD, another couple were for Lot J. Lot J was proposing to make all these parking spaces for use of Lot J to meet their parking requirement of 26 parking spaces. The concerns of the Basalt River Lofts, as they've indicated them, that they feel like these spaces shouldn't be provided for use of Lot J, except for the 2 spaces that were originally platted for Lot J. And so, staff feels that there's kind of a need to try to bring the groups together here and maybe kind of adjust the proposed parking situation to address Basalt River Lofts concerns. And so that's why we're recommending ultimately continuing this evening to see if we can, have a meeting of the minds to figure out the parking issue there that they're having.
So James, my thinking is such that we'll go through our questions and comments like we normally do, and our public hearing like we normally do, but then we'll just continue the public hearing portion of this to the next meeting, right? Is that true?
Yeah, that's what staff's recommendation is.
Okay, does that make sense, Rob?
Yeah, that was my question, Bill. Thanks. So we won't talk about parking tonight.
You can bring it up, but staff thinks that, we have some conversations to have before having P&Z make a final decision on it.
Alrighty, that makes sense. That makes sense to you, Rob?
Yes, thank you.
Good. Okay, let's start with commissioner questions of staff and the applicant. Eric, do you want to start?
Sure. And picking up that theme, because I do have a couple questions. Susan, James, in regard to the code, it seemed to me adding up, it was like 21 bedrooms between the units. Why 26 spots?
There's a guest parking requirement when you have more than 6 units in a building. It's 0.25 parking spaces per unit. So.
And do we have flexibility to go against the code? This seems a transit-oriented project. It seems like it's the end of the road. The applicant seems to be working with us as far as, bike sharing and bike parking. I would rather minimize travel by car if we could. It doesn't seem like we gain a lot from the town having spaces all the way out there, versus in town where we have a lack of spaces. So I don't know. The question, I guess, is what's our flexibility?
Well, I think staff kind of needs to work through that flexibility before we can kind of give you an answer. The concerns kind of came up this afternoon, and so we haven't really had time to fully work through the parking concerns. We think we can come back at the next meeting and at least talk through the options related to parking.
Okay, cool. And then just for my own clarity, I walked the site today. The spots that I guess are to the west of the lofts, those are spots for the lofts. As I was out there, it didn't seem attached to a building. They just seemed like spaces.
Some of the spots are for the Basalt River Lofts, and then kind of beyond those spaces, there's 20-some parking spaces that are just general public spaces. You have a trail head there at the middle of the development, and so there's 20-some parking spaces that are general public use spaces.
They really belong to the town.
No one's questions in our format. I would urge flexibility then with the spots of maybe those 20 somehow being used if it helps kind of get to a decision. So,
I think.
A couple other questions. I didn't see anything. Aaron, are there any issues as far as travel and peak travel times, 9 o'clock in the morning? Everybody leaving at the same time and backing up at the circle there. Is any indication that that's an issue?
We haven't heard that, and we did go through the PUD process with Roaring Fork Apartments and the town and the Picken County as well. Picken County and Roaring Fork Apartments and Harry Teague's building. And so that was never expressed a morning traffic flood or anything like that.
Well, thanks. I know on the other side where I live in Southside, I know especially school times, it backs up and becomes an issue. So I just don't want to cause another problem, with the additional 20 some odd trips that are going to be happening. I do appreciate everything you were talking about, meeting the sustainability goals. Have you given any thought to going beyond, that's a great, roof line and going beyond just the meeting of the need for your facility? I know Holy Cross announced today they're trying to go 100% electric, renewable by 2030. Maybe they can buy in and use some of that great space. Just an idea, a thought, something to throw out to you guys as a possibility. And then lastly, is the parapet only meant to shield the panels, or is it at a architectural value, breaking up the mass at all? Or is it just something, that 3-foot parapet I think you talked about?
Yeah, I'll let Ramsey and Jeff take this one.
Sure.
James, can you go to our application document there and show the sheet that has to do with the 30-foot prescriptive PUD height versus the 33 feet?
Yeah.
Because I think the answer to that really lies in the understanding of that graphic. So right on that graphic there, you can kind of see the difference in the building form as seen from our neighbor at 30 feet or 33 feet. And then right in the middle of both of those diagrams, you see a section through one of the 12 units, right? And so the quality that we're trying to create here is to have higher ceilings and have around a 9-foot ceiling in the spaces. That's going to allow a lot more natural light and less dependency on artificial lighting in the daytime. It's going to create for more open environment, better air circulation, and also, better views to the natural habitat. Furthermore, we are going to have to use ceiling area of the units for mechanical runs to get ventilation and conditioned air to the bedrooms from the main in the unit area that it's coming from. And that's going to potentially drop the unit size, as we have noted in that document there, from either the 9-foot or the 8-foot down about 8 to 10 more inches. So we're talking about a sub 8-foot ceiling in some of the areas. And so it really has a lot to do with quality as well. But then about, like James wrote in his write-up, about 18 inches of that that we had left over staying underneath the C3 height limit we're using for parapet in order to shield the solar panels. And it just, I don't think that the 30-foot height limit reflected the necessity to have 3 floors in this. 33 is a very typical and reasonable height for a 3-story building. And with the density, we're just trying to create the quality that the spaces deserve.
Thanks. Mr. Chairman, that's all I have.
All right, let's go back to our screen, and Kyle, do you have any questions? And please keep it to questions, and you'll have a chance for your comments later.
No, my only questions regarding the height that was just discussed. So I guess one question was, in the Basalt Lofts letter to you guys, they were in favor of everything except the 33-foot height request. Did you guys have a discussion with them regarding that, and kind of any more detail you could add to that and why they're against that?
Yeah, I mean, I imagine someone from that entity is on the line, so I don't want to speak on their behalf. But in the original meeting where we met with all the parties that have a vote on this matter in the Basalt Commercial Park, it wasn't really something that was highlighted. It sort of came a little bit afterwards to that, and we have not had many follow-up discussions with them on that subject. And honestly, I think it's a fairly nominal height difference from their vantage point and the distance away, and so I'm in the arena where I just want to maintain the quality for the occupants of this building, and I feel like it's a reasonable request.
And then one other question regarding the gear storage. I think on the drawings they're like 13 square feet or so. Again, it's a sketch, but again, the lofts have a storage disconnected from their building that's, I think, maybe a bit bigger. Is there any chance of that for, again, larger items such as tires or anything else? Just that is something that's definitely needed in some of these apartments, is more storage area.
That's a good point. Yeah.
And one of the challenges to being able to do that is the building envelope. They pretty much take up the full building envelope. So, in order to do kind of a storage pod like the Basalt River Lofts have, they don't really have the building envelope space to do it under the current approvals.
Okay, thank you.
The gear closets, I think they would be able to hold a fairly standard sized pile. I don't have the exact dimensions in front of me, but they're fairly sizable. They may be smaller than the ones next door, but I think the intention was gear, so skis and bikes, and that's kind of how they were designed to make sure they could hold all of that. And it seems to be adequate for quite a bit of the outdoor gear storage.
All right, Kyle.
That's it for me.
All right, thanks. Gino, do you have any questions of staff or the applicant?
Okay, just a couple for me, if you don't mind. I'd like to just make sure I heard this right and know my problem. But James, is this a rental project or is it a condo project?
Rental. Yeah, rental.
Okay. The question I have is because of the site plan makes quite a bit of notion about the stairs going up to the roof. Does that imply that the roof is to be used for some kind of activity that the residents would enjoy or not? Or was the stair just shown?
The stair isn't intended to go to the roof. There might be an access hatch for working on the PV panels or any equipment that might be up there or vents, but there's no occupant or public use of the rooftop. We don't really have the height, and we have to have a little more height in order to incorporate that because of the guardrails required.
The question was followed by a statement. I have no problem with the 33 feet. In fact, I applaud it. The question I would have is, do you have any room on the site plan itself that would allow you to stagger the south side or the highway side a little bit? It seems to be the riverside elevation seems to be very pleasant. The big black mother on the looking at the highway is a little bit forbidding, and I was wondering if you could, is there any room to set it back even a couple, 3 feet? Maybe even just the end unit, I don't know. I don't know where your restrictions are.
Yeah, I mean, I would urge James to show the site plan, but we are pretty pinched in there. We're really utilizing this property to the maximum extent possible. I can't say it's not possible because anything is possible, right? I mean, I'm pretty happy with the articulation of breaking up the front facade, but utilizing the full frontage of that for maximizing the envelope for housing and affordable construction techniques. But yeah, if you zoom in there, you can see that on the back side where we might be able to shift the building back, we're really up against that setback line already. And then also towards the right side, you can see the 100-year floodplain starts to become a factor. But yeah, anything is always possible, of course, right? So.
Good, thank you. That's all I have.
All right, thank you, Gino. James, could you put the regular screen back so I can see everyone there?
Yeah.
There we go. Rob, do you have any questions of staff or the applicant?
Briefly, is there any chance that this building would eventually become condominiumized?
I might ask Jeff to chime into that one, but I believe we were given the option of possibly having separate gas lines or something of that nature, and we chose not to not have that opportunity in the future because it's fairly solidly proposed to be apartments. Jeff, do you want to help me with that one?
Yeah, it has to do with the sewer and water board, and that was the variance that James had spoken to about getting separate lines to every unit versus a single line to the building. And if we do a single line to the building, basically we negate the opportunity to condominiumize in the future because then they can't meter it separately anymore.
James, there's no way around that?
The Sand District usually requires that if they were to grant a variance for a shared sewer service line to the building, that they enter into an agreement with the Sand District that says that they wouldn't condominiumize in the future.
So we don't need to add that kind of language anywhere?
I mean,
Yes,
the Sand District will probably ask us to as part of the final plan review. That's usually how it works. If they're going to grant a variance, but the Sand District also does a separate agreement with them as part of a variance.
And so we actually added that as a condition on the approval. If you look at the schedule of requirements in the conditions, it says that they won't condominiumize it. And that was really to go along with their representation that this was a workforce, housing situation, and it wasn't going to be converted to high-end condominiums.
Okay, and that's the question I'm
Yeah, yeah, so it is part of our conditions that we have in the draft that you have to review.
Great.
Okay.
There she is. At what point does that Emma Road become a road, a private road, I guess it is, and not a parking lot? I know we had a conversation with Rhonda when she built about traffic going through there, and I know the police fire had some questions. Is it going to be an issue, and is it something we need to look to improve?
Well, the fire district, in reviewing the application, felt that they had acceptable access. And over time, you know, the fire district has worked with some of the deliveries that happen kind of down by the River Park Center area to try to help prevent them from, you know, having an impact on the traffic flow. You know, they've had a certain level of success in doing that. You know, I would say also in the Basalt River Lofts letter that you see in your packet, there was mention of that area right in front of Subway where you have vehicles that kind of illegally park from time to time. Usually it's bigger trucks that are stopping to get a sandwich or something of that nature. And that does create some issues with the traffic flow going around kind of that S-curve there. And you know, the police department has put up a sign. There's a sign. You know, they do enforcement from time to time. And so, you know, I think we're open to talking about other methods of trying to alleviate that issue. As part of the Roaring Fork apartment approvals, when they built that building, they had to change the turning radius around that corner in front of Subway to make it easier to get around and have more access width there. And so that's helped to a certain extent as well.
Where does it switch from a public road to a private road?
Right there in front of Subway. So that little area where you have people that park illegally from time to time, right there by the seed garden, that area is public. But once you make the turn in front of Subway, then it turns into a private road.
So if improvements needed to be made, can the town force that on a private road?
Well, we could as part of any approvals, but it would be,
They can't hear you.
oh, that's okay.
I can hear.
You can hear her? Okay.
Yeah.
She's coming over this way.
Yeah, can you hear me when I'm speaking into the mic here? Because I thought you could. Can you? Okay.
We can hear you.
Yeah. You know, as part of an approval, just like our approval on Real America, we can ask someone to fix the situation. It's a little bit more problematic because it is a private road. So we're an owner because we own Lot H and we own Lot K, but it's pretty difficult for us to force something outside of a land use application process. I mean, if we came to the table with money and the town said, oh, we'd like to make an improvement here, you know, I'm sure they would listen to us, but I think it would be a little problematic.
I mean, I guess with this built to 100 car trips a day, if that S turns past Stubby's and then Subway turns into a disaster, how's it gonna get fixed?
Well, I would say you currently have the ability to build commercial space and residential on Lot J. So I think you kind of have to look at the increment of increase. You know, you're going to have traffic from Lot J regardless of what your development program is, and so you know, I think.
But
yeah.
once it's built, the only time we can suggest any improvements is prior to approvals. So you just said that, Susan.
Yeah, Yeah.
That's true.
Okay.
And I guess it's a difficult one because, I mean, there aren't any natural improvements that you would make to the development. I mean, there isn't anything that says, okay, if we just fix this, traffic would flow. You know, and I think, as James noted, that the real issue is probably more commercial loading than it is actual number of vehicles coming in and out.
We're not gonna concern about that when we build Real America, and I think that's just still a concern.
Yeah.
That's all I have.
Yep.
Thank you, Rob. Bernie, do you have any questions of staff or the applicant?
Yeah, on the back side facing 82, what kind of vegetation are you planning as a buffer, and how much of the natural vegetation would be left between your building and 82?
James, I think we might want to go to the landscape plan that you had open before.
Sure.
But we do have planting right up against the building between there and the parking that's provided. Then, you know, behind that, there's a drive that really is not moving location. And as part of our parking scheme, the round 2 parking scheme especially, we did take into consideration saving a specific ponderosa pine that the city arborist deemed is in good health and worth receiving. The rest of the foliage that is really there is not in harm's way. It's in that CDOT, I would assume, zone between Highway 82 and our property. So the ponderosa pine, the retaining of vegetation that's beyond the property lines, and then also there's some site beautification of trees on the corner of that peninsula next to parking, and then between the sidewalk and the building, we have some low vegetation planned to help block that as well.
Okay, thank you.
And
Randy, is that all you have?
That's all I have.
All right. Michelle, do you have any questions of staff or the applicant?
I do. I have one quick question for James. And I don't want to go down the rabbit hole of parking, but I'm just wondering, is it because of the way the right-of-way is platted on the lot that there's not parallel parking on the south side of the site?
Well, it's not actually right away because it's a private road. But there is public easements on it. And let me go back and share my screen here, just a quick second.
So just without knowing what else is there, it just seems like a lot of space.
Sure. So once again, going back to this inset, so basically, this is a private road, and there are 2 parking spaces that exist. These 2 spaces exist, and what was platted originally was that there were 5 total spaces here, and you know, this line right here is the CDOT right-of-way line, this solid line. So there is room for more parking here that would be parallel. But as you'll probably hear in the public comments and as staff heard today, you know, the Basalt River Lofts residents aren't real excited about having Lot J parking more than was previously allocated across from their building. So there's room, but you know, there's concern there, and as I indicated, you know, staff thinks that there's probably some room for conversation and you know, maybe looking at some different alternatives to maybe help get a better comfort level from the Basalt River Loft owners.
Well, that makes sense. I was actually thinking further to the east, so that it would be across from, yeah, like basically where the topo line is.
Let me zoom back out here.
Yeah, like in front of the trees.
So this is,
the dimension just too small?
so here's the ponderosa pine that is a significant tree that the town arborist and town staff had indicated would be appropriate to preserve. You're talking about over here potentially?
Yes. Yeah.
That could be something that could be looked at. There is more vegetation over in this area. And so what we'd also have to look at is the width of kind of space before you get to the CDOT right of way to see if you could fit the parallel parking there.
James, if I could just chime in there. Yeah,
Sure.
There's not enough width to get parking before you get to the property line and have the distance across the road needed for the fire district to get their trucks in there. So we would love to put it there, but it's not feasible.
That makes sense. Thanks. That's my main question.
All right, thank you, Michelle. Okay, I have some questions that I would like to bring up. The first one is for James. In the current PUD, is the first floor commercial required, or is that just allowed?
It's allowed, but there's not an allowance in the PUD for this lot for residential on the first floor currently.
Does that mean it's required if it's not,
Yeah.
there's no allowance for it?
I guess commercial, residential is not permitted on the first floor, and so I guess you could say it's required, sure.
Okay, that makes sense. I wasn't clear about that. That seemed kind of squishy to me. Okay, and also, again for James, in my packet, I didn't see any draft conditions, but I may just be missing it, but I went over 3 or 4 times, I didn't see them. Must be some other place. But you don't need to answer that now, but I have a few more questions as I go through this. Let's start with the materials. We spoke vaguely about the materials being warm. What is anticipated for materials that would be warm?
Well, we have the intention of having down low on the elevation, if you look at the renderings, to being sort of board and bat as opposed to bat and board, with some rough sawn stained product down low, and then obviously the slats that are between the massing that kind of break it up, that become the stair core. That's something that will probably be some sort of composite but wood-like referencing material to keep the flammability down. Then above that, we're really going for something that's a little more hardy and durable, probably being corrugated with a baked-on finish product. And then we have some white area as you wrap around the back of the building. But we really think that the wood element, or could be the light wood element of the slats, as well as the lower down and where you're going to be able to touch it area being a rough sawn product, is one way we might achieve it. But then again, we're still in the preliminary stages. But that's kind of my intention of where this is headed.
Okay, that's good enough for now, because I know that none of this has actually been determined yet. And I imagine it will be by final, but by final, we'd kind of like to see that as to what actually would be.
Yes, sir.
Let's see, anticipated rents. This is, the affordability of this has been mentioned quite a number of times, but affordability of rents has not. And so I was wondering what the 1-bedroom and two-bedroom rents are anticipated to be at?
So in my line of work, we've done quite a few apartment properties, appraised apartment properties in the valley, and some rent surveys and such. And so the anticipation is the larger two-bedroom, two-bath, the 6 units that are nearly identical mirrored on the western portion. Those would probably somewhere around $2,500 a month. And then the deed restrictions are Unit C, and I think right now with Category 2, those are, I'm probably wrong on this, around $1,850, somewhere around there, $1,900. And then the one bedrooms on the end, those are fairly small. I know I live in Willits and rent my ADU, and that, I get $1,700 for that, so I anticipate it would probably be somewhere a little bit more than that, but not much, probably $1,800.
Alrighty, thank you. And my final question is, all of the first floor units are required to be type B. Don't appear to be type B bathrooms. How do you anticipate that to work?
I'll let Jeff take that one because he worked to make these conforming. You want to kind of run through that really quick?
Yeah, there's a couple of different conditions for conforming versus totally accessible, and it's these only have to be conforming in that you can change out the sink, the vanities into pedestal units, and you can install grab bars. They don't have to have turning radiuses because they are not completely accessible units. So that's the difference between a type B unit, which all these need to be, and either a type A or an accessible unit, which are fully accessible.
Well, I've done type B bathrooms with Rick when he was in Glenwood, and they required grab bars on two sides of the toilets, and I don't see that. So that's a comment question.
Yeah. No, and we went through this with Rick already, and he kind of pointed us in this direction that they just need to be adaptable. So the two-sided grab bar thing, you can have the fold-down style, where it's mounted on the wall and then folds down in order to grab it on the bathtub side.
Okay, if Rick's okay with it, I have no question.
We'll see when it goes to plan review, but yeah, that's what he pointed us towards.
Okay, that is all of my questions. Let's open up the public hearing. Kyle, yes.
Just a two-part question regarding the parking. If you were shifting the parking to the south, I know it's too narrow now. Is it too narrow by 20 feet or like a very minimal amount? As in, if there was a variance on the lot setback and you could shift the building closer to the river, could you even get close to having parallel parking in there?
We're so tight up against the not only the building setback, but the 100-year floodplain cuts into that as well, and that really limits our access on that backside, on the river side.
That also,
it's only a couple of feet that would be needed between the road and the property line on the south side.
But as the applicant's aware that there is most likely a large amount of excess parking between the Salt River Lofts and the Roaring Fork Apartments, which seems like there's plenty of parking there if we were able to dedicate it further down the row as well. So I think there might actually be some even better options to that, but that's one that we would be willing to entertain as well.
Thank you.
Alrighty.
And Chair Marin, the conditions start on page 20 of your packet, online version. So if you're on the computer version and you go to 20 of the 82 pages, you'll find the conditions.
You do do that. I did want to see that because I was looking for something along those lines. I didn't see it. But before we go to, hang on a sec, I gotta zip through this. PDFs are sometimes complicated to navigate. Anyway, I'll do that while we're getting public comment. Let's open up the public comment of section of the meeting at 7:26 p.m.
And just a general announcement, it looks like the people that identified that they would like to speak are on hold here, waiting for us to allow them to speak. But if you're watching the grassroots and you would like to participate, the easiest way to do it is to go on the Agenda Center on the town's webpage and hit the link, and it'll take you there. If not, you can dial 1-669-900-6833, and then the webinar ID is 990-9144. 1310. And if you have problems, overall, you can just call my cell, which is 970-379-1514. So I think James is ready to go ahead and allow the folks that are on the screen to talk.
So we first have Harry Teague, and I'm going to allow him to talk. Harry, can you hear us? And it looks like you're muted. Yeah, there you go. Can hear you now. Great.
Okay. Thank you. Hey, great presentation, Ramsey. Thank you. And
Hey, thanks.
I have to say a bunch of different things. Very sympathetic with the need for housing in Basalt. I think that's admirable. I think I really appreciate the applicants reaching out to us at North Mill. That's my other problem. At the River Lofts. And but I think what we have here, and it's interesting, I want to do a couple of things. One, when we built our building, we were held very strictly to a 30-foot height limit. And the reason we were able to get solar panels on the roof was we explained that it was either solar panels or condensers for air conditioning and whatnot. And the solar panels were equally abhorrent as the air conditioning condensers or whatever on the roof and so on. And that was one of the things. So we were held very strictly to that 30-foot height limit, and it was also partly explained that it was because they really didn't think we could do 3 stories in it. And we went through a lot of trouble to make units to do 3 stories in our units that could fit within that height limit and work in various tricks to make the building actually comply with that height limit. The other thing that happened was that it was explained to us, and we complied, that the frontage along that street should be 2 stories high. And it was the reason that we were approved in the end. And Susan, I think you may recall this, because I think you may have been the person that was being the strongest in advocating that the street frontage on this height was meant to be 2 stories high. So when we did our building, that phase of our building was required to be 2 stories high. Now, going back again, I think the height, the idea of having more housing rather than less is a good idea. No problem. I get that. But I see this project in every way going right to the edge of the boundaries that have been created, and then exceeding them in every way. And I would say, can this project work with 4 less units, or perhaps a lower height? Would it be just as good without that? In many ways, I think we have a traffic problem, a cluster down as we get out of the end of the road. That's been there, and it's exacerbated by the America project and so on. And we're adding again to that. I realize, okay, the other thing that we were required to do was to make our first floor mixed use. That was the concept at the time, that was mixed use. I don't have a personal problem with that being residential. I think the rest of the people in our unit don't, but the idea that, again, we were required to make our ground floor commercial in our case. So there's a difficulty here in terms of precedent. Is this the town accommodating itself and breaking its own rules, or is this in fact, the rules that they applied in their earlier iteration, or is this in fact, to the benefit of the town as a whole, and we all agree? I think it's complicated. I would say, so the parking issue, I think, has been expressed repeatedly, that as far as the river lofts, yes, we do acknowledge that 2 of those spaces would be used by, officially used by Lot J. But on the other hand, but we were also then required to pave and accommodate with accessible spaces and so on, additional spaces down towards, the center of town in that direction, to have our parking work in this case. So I'm just saying, I don't see that, if we actually have that many cars in this end of the lot, there's going to be a constant conflict with the people coming up to our commercial spaces, which we were required to do, and the residential uses that would be used by Lot J. So I see that as a potential conflict. Lighting. I would like to emphasize that the lighting that was done for the America First project, there's a whole bunch of street lights that are put up that seem to not comply with Basalt's dark skies idea. If we have parking along that road, I understand why. I can see that they're there, but it's lit up like a shopping mall parking lot right now. And there are no cars there. It's the road that comes down to our space. Could we, and I'm hoping that in the process of approval that we all agree, and I don't want to be adversarial with Aaron and Ramsey here at all. I'm just saying, could we work together to make sure that the lighting is done in the way that we did at our building, so that it's down low and doesn't light up the entire sky for this part of the project? I think that would be a really positive direction. What happens, and if you drive down that road at night, you see what I'm complaining about right now. The next issue is the road itself. That's one more cluster in this particularly weird subdivision. What happens with that is we're not really sure who owns the road. Right now, some people plow it. It's a private road, there's no question. On the other hand, the city occasionally plows it. The city occasionally uses the hydrant along that route to replenish its street cleaner. It used to dump the street cleaner along that road. It doesn't anymore because we complain. But there is a sort of a complication. It would be really nice if, in the process of doing this project, and I don't want to hold it up, but I'd say if we could start to make some agreements about who actually owns this road, who's going to deal with it, does the town want it? There's a park at the end that Ramsey talked about. That's beautiful. The great big trees and so on. How do you get there? Where do you park to go there? Do you park way down the street, or you actually go by there and then fight it out with the people on in our unit? I'm just bringing up a bunch of issues that are not completely clear yet that would be really important for us to resolve. Right now, we are not able to allocate spaces. If 2 spaces or 6 spaces are in fact Lot J's required parking, who administers the fact that anybody could park in those spaces? At this point, several points, people in the Basalt River Lofts have approached the town about designating spaces for the people in the building, particular spaces, right? And the town has said, no, that isn't, it's fine, but they said, no, we can't do that. We have people that want to build covers for their cars, or leave a tent, so their car can park in their car in a particular place. That would all be in conflict with what I understand to be the regulations controlling those parking places. So I would say if you were to designate 4 more spaces in front of in front of the Basalt River Lofts, it would be, it's not clear to me, who would park there, when they would park there, how long they could park there, etc. It becomes kind of it's a confusing situation, that's all. The site, let's see, the search from I would just show that actually the building that we're talking about, the reason I'm concerned about the height, and I'm going to be quite adamant about that, is that I realize, and Ramsey made a good point, it's not terribly significant in terms of an elevation of how much more 3 feet is in the given height of the building. On the other hand, it's actually not terribly far from the southern face, or whatever that particular face is, what we'll call the southern face, the upriver Aspen side of our building, and the new building. And that 3 feet actually from the angle of the apartments on the end of that building is actually quite significant. There's only a T-bone road in between and the trees that are shown in the landscaping plan. And so I would, at this point, want to support the owner of that unit who is adamant that those 3 feet are actually quite important to him. So I would take that into consideration. So we have a building that's actually 3 stories along the street front instead of 2, which is what we were required. We have a 3-story building there, and I would suggest that it's actually 3 feet higher, that this building actually is quite massive compared to our building. Now, whether that's a bad thing or a good thing, I don't know. That's an aesthetic. I actually don't mind buildings varying in height. I would just say that, in fairness, is it fair to have one building all of a sudden be this much higher just because of the reasons that they stated, which don't seem to be particularly convincing in my case? The people in my building or in Basalt River Lofts are perfectly happy with their ceiling heights. That's not a major deal. So we just put that out. It's not a problem. I did point out how I think we should think about what that use of that triangle at the end. Is it only going to be accessible by a pedestrian path that is now complete to the end of the access road where the kayak lot is, or is there going to be a park in that zone? And if so, how will people access it? I think that's quite important to figure out in relationship to the parking that we're doing here. I do think it's a major asset for living at this end, and I wish that everybody that lives down at that end of the road actually lives in a beautiful place, and that would be good. Storage. I would think this is a really big issue. The unit that we have, they're 8 by 12, I'd say, is what they are. That's the square footage. They're inadequate. The people that live in those units can barely keep all the crap that they have inside those units. So I'm just saying, storage is huge. There doesn't seem to be adequate storage in this. And if there isn't, what happens is it flows out all over the place, and we get things that are happening already in America First, which is various tent camps of motorcycles and bicycles and things like that along in parking places on the America First road. So I'm just saying, in terms of good planning, is it good planning to not have that and have it explode around the building, or is it better planning to actually maybe lose a unit, have some storage? I don't know. That may not be economically feasible. I'm just saying what we're doing is maximizing the number of units at the cost of several other factors. Compatible massing, parking, storage, various things like that. Let's see, one other item. would just say that the last thing is a very minor thing, but Ramsey, you mentioned that you have broken this up vertically. So far as what I see is it broken into various masses, the horizontal mass is broken up into various elements. I don't see it broken up into vertical elements. That's a minor thing. I would just say, and actually the appearance of the building is fine. I have no objection. I think Ramsey's done a great job. So that's not an issue. But I would just say that the massing has not been broken up vertically. And that if you had a mixed use, the lower level would in fact have quite a different texture than the upper levels. And that again is something that we did in our building and has not been done in this one. So those are my comments. There are probably more, but those would be the items. Thank you.
In the concern of brevity, I'd like to keep it there to these comments. I do have to make dinner for my kids at some point. So thank you very much, Harry. Anybody else?
Yes, so the next person we have is Jeffrey Sterner, and I am unmuting Jeff here. Jeff, can you hear us?
So, thank you. I'm Jeff Sterner. Yeah, hold on a quick second. As I was saying, in the interest of brevity, please keep your comments to 3 minutes if you could.
I appreciate that, but this is an important topic to me, so I have a fair amount of my net worth tied up in this condo. I've lived here since 2013, that's when I purchased the unit, so I do have concerns about the height. In 2003, the Basalt Commercial Park zoning and use restrictions were defined. So the current zoning for the Basalt Commercial Park is C3 PUD. However, the height limit for our building, Basalt River Lofts, and Aaron's at Lot J was designated as 30 feet high. Down the street where Real America is, those buildings were granted higher height limits, but they also had greater commercial usage allowances things. So I think the town's intent in 2003 was to keep these lots, I and J, the building smaller and also lower density. And so I think increasing to 33 is it gives you the 12 units, but then it leads to conversations about, well, we've gone from 17 parking spots in the 2003 PUD restrictions to now 26, with many of those spilling over to spots that are adjacent to our building. And so, it came up where those 6 spots were dedicated. The proposal was to dedicate those spots to Lot J, which would prevent me from parking across the street from my own house, right? So there's just some issues with density here that I think in 2003, again, wanted the lower density, smaller buildings, and now we're talking about a much, much larger project. The second and last point I'd like to make is that on June 9th, on behalf of the Basalt River Lofts Owners Association, I did send Aaron Ward and James Lint the letter that's now included in your packet that you have in your hands tonight. Aaron acknowledged receipt of that letter on June 10th. Now, the issue I have with this is that Aaron submitted his application to the town on August 10th. And within that application, the letter from Basalt River Lofts was excluded. Now, other owners within the commercial park, their letters giving approval for the height increase and the variance allowance for 100% residential were included. So I don't quite know what happened there and why our letter was excluded. I just want to make sure that the official record there is corrected, and that on June 9th, before he submitted his application, he was aware of our objections to the height increase. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Jeffrey. James, is there anyone else in the queue?
Yes, we have, I think this is John Helm. John, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. I thought Harry's presentation was perfect, right on, and I really don't have anything to add to Harry or Jeff's, other than the fact that I've owned my unit here since 2010. We've put up with, a traffic situation up at the circle, the digging in the river for, 2 winters straight at 7 in the morning, rocks being dropped, blah, blah, but, things go on, but the parking situation has got to be resolved. Now, up valley from their site, the town of Basalt owns. So maybe we can work something out with the town of Basalt that the extra 9 parking spots we need could go onto the town of Basalt lot, whatever it is. To have people that are gonna drive past, park in front of my house, it's only, if you look at the road, it's not very far, slam their doors, 2 in the morning, whatever, I don't think you would want that to happen in front of your house. So that is all I'm talking about. We have to resolve the parking issue.
Thank you, John.
And John, could you just state your name into the record, please?
My name, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
John, Helm, Unit D, 129 Emma Road.
Thank you, John. James, anyone else in the queue?
Yeah, we have Robert Thorpe. Robert, can you hear us?
Need to unmute him or something.
Robert, you're muted. Okay, you're unmuted now.
Okay, Robert, before you start, again, I'd like to remind everyone, try and keep this under 3 minutes if you could.
Robert, are you there? It appears that Robert is unmuted. Now he's muted again. Let me... Robert, it looks like you're muted on your end.
So Robert, my suggestion is if you can't, try your volume and try taking your cursor over to the microphone and try hitting another connect on it. If you can't, call my cell 379-1514 and we'll see if you can hear through my phone. Do you want to try that? So that's 970-379-1514. And let me just double check that no one's emailed, saying that they had trouble. There, no, that's John. So I don't have any emails and I don't have any incoming calls. Can you hear him now?
I can't unmute him from here. He has to do it on his end.
Okay, so, well, I guess my suggestion would be that if he has comments that he would like to make, that he send an email to James Lint, and then we'll, since we're not taking action tonight, it'll be, we'll forward those on to you guys. And then enter them into the record at the next meeting.
So that's all we have in terms of public comments at this point.
And just to acknowledge, our standard practices is that someone can speak one time in our public hearing comment. I did notice that Harry actually has his hand up, Bill, that he wanted to speak again. So I don't know how you want to handle that.
Who has a hand up? I didn't see.
I think that was from earlier.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't see any hands up now.
Okay.
Okay, let's close, first off, let's close the public comment portion of the meeting at 7:51 PM. We could, and then let's go on to commissioner comments. And let's start again with Eric. Eric, do you have any comments to make about this? Specifically, since height is a big issue and parking is an issue, if you can comment on those two.
Sure. I hate to compare projects, past projects to current projects. 3 feet is not a huge thing to quibble, and it shouldn't matter, you know, what we did with the prior approvals to the other building. However, in the spirit of neighborliness, you know, it would be nice to kind of figure out a way to figure out a compromise. Personally, you know, the 3 feet as broken down, 1.5 feet for a parapet to cover the solar panels. I disagree with Harry. I think solar panels are not an eyesore. I don't have a problem and feel a need necessarily to cover them up. I think it actually flows with the other buildings, so that's 1.5 feet right there. I like the idea of having 1.5 feet to work with space to make the apartments nicer. It does seem like that's a possibility of something you can work out. I don't think the questions that were raised by other people, by the building next door, are insurmountable issues. I like the project. I like that you're maximizing space. I like the fact that there are 12 units that are either affordable or representative of housing that doesn't exist too much. Would I be really upset if it becomes 11 units to work with these issues, or 10 units versus 12? No. So that parking, as we talked earlier, I know we're going to kind of table that to work through separately at a later time, but obviously there's a lot of issues. I know it's not parking, but that roadscape also really worries me, whether that's, as Rob brought up, the curve, where trucks might be parking, or the Valero backup at certain times of day. And that might be beyond the applicant's scope themselves. But it looks like something probably should be addressed there. I think you have a good project. I just think there's some things to overcome.
Thank you, Eric. Kyle, comments, please.
Harry brought up that that staff had required them to only have 2 floors that were facing the street level. Is that in the code, or what is the history behind that, and why is that not part of this discussion?
Well, I wasn't with the town staff then. Susan, do you have any recollection on that?
Well, you know what, I'd have to go back and think about the response. I'll respond better at the next meeting, but this was a different PUD, so when it was originally approved, it wasn't as intense as it is the size of the buildings. And when we did the river master plan and we did some new floodplain mapping, significant portions of these lots in the subdivision were not buildable in their current configuration. So these buildings at the end were much smaller heights in the original approval. Let's say they were 25 or 28 feet, both Harry Teague's building and this one. And as part, the town was coming and asking the property owner to replat these areas into different lots. The town paid for that work, and we worked with all the different property owners. So, what was explained to us at those properties at the end, we weren't thinking that they were going to be 3 stories, either one of them. We were thinking they were going to be 2 stories, and it was kind of expressed to us that let's give a little bit more height. Let's have more height so that we can have architectural features, et cetera, and more flexibility to have the first floor plate height on the commercial buildings higher, which is better for commercial uses. So I think that a lot of it was, Harry was proving to us that he could do 3 floors very nicely in his space and he wasn't asking for an additional height. What he was trying to do was prove that he could do 3 stories with the restriction that he has commercial. And so we were trying to make the topology the same as it was going to be. I mean, that's the best answer I can get at this time, is we're trying to get the typology of the building kind of the same as it was originally in 2002. 2002, 2003.
Thank you for that, Susan. Kyle, is that it? Does that answer your question?
Yep, thank you.
Okay. Do you have any further comments to make, or is that it?
That's it.
Okay, great. Gino, comments, please.
I have a few comments. I'd like to follow up on both Eric and Rod's points on the road and the parking. I think we're making a little bit too much of a point on this damn parking issue. I guess maybe that's why it's a good thing that James recommended that we just have a continuance and not make a vote tonight. I think that one of the things he should look at is, I don't know what's east of us other than trees. I don't know if that site's available, whether the town owns it or what, but perhaps maybe you could snuggle in 3-4 cars have been there. But one of the good things about this site and the private road part of it is that it's very adjacent to the rapid transit, the transit system, and that's primarily what's I think very important on people that will be renting, especially the affordable housing renting. And I don't see or think that they'll have that much of a parking problem per se. Two cars per bedroom or 2 cars per unit is appropriate. And yes, you can have an extra car for visitors. I don't know why also maybe the lines can be drawn differently where the fire access that runs towards the river can't be moved a little bit to the west to possibly allow another 3-4 cars to be parked up next to the building on the west side. So I think that you do have your homework, but I don't get all shook up about the parking problem. I'm not one for looking back as much as I am for looking forward on what we're trying to help people bring, particularly affordable housing or even deed restriction housing to the Suffolk. I think the one point that Harry did make that I would like to emphasize on, because I did go down there at nighttime, is that lighting is important, and I don't know that it has been addressed. But too much lighting is also bad for the area. I think that I personally, so let me stop right there. I really like the project, and I want the project to go ahead. I probably would go to, even with some of the restrictions that we're putting on it. I really prefer the undulation on the riverside, but I don't care for the fish and pheasants to be looking at it. But I do not like the south side. I'm not a fan of black buildings, and just adding more black down in that area is, to me, not very positive. So I do wish he'd take a crack at that, not only vertically but horizontally, if we could set back maybe even just the end unit to try to break things up. So I'm not particularly happy with the architecture, but the planning I think is fine. I think the concept is fine. I think the location is great, and I really hope that we can help the developer make something strong. That's the end of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Gino. Rob, do you have any comments to make?
Yeah, I'm going to agree with Gino that driving by and looking at a very large black flat wall is unappealing. I really like the way the stairwells are broken up, and it just seems like it could architecturally, without leaving the building envelope, but with awnings or colors or materials, somehow break up that large black mass. You know, I have a philosophical concern, and we talked about this in the master plan, where we're adding housing but no jobs, right? This was a place that was targeted for some jobs, and all of a sudden we now have 12 units, which is putting 24 more people on the highway driving up to Aspen to work every morning, and making us more of a bedroom community and not just a community where people can live and work. And that's, you know, that's a big P&Z discussion to have, but we don't have a lot of available land to still zone and create jobs, and this is one of them. And it's hard for me to see those just go away. As far as the height goes, everybody who's ever built has wanted taller ceilings. I did in my house. I had to lower the upstairs ceilings because I exceeded the height on the first drawings. So sure, everybody would like it, but we have rules, and you know, if we change the rules here, we're just going to change them forever going forward. That's my concerns.
All right, thank you, Rob. Bernie, comments, please.
Yeah, I just want to put this project in context of our overall planning, which is contained in our master plan. So something very definitely changed between the time that Harry Teague's building was approved and us looking at this project. And that was the revision of the town master plan that was adopted unanimously by this body and by the town council. And that is the planning document that governs our decision. That document states clearly that increased density downtown and especially affordable housing and livability are two primary thrusts and goals in town planning. This, of course, results in some inconveniences. It's inevitable. As you increase density, you can increase congestion and other barely minor, but to people who live there, and I don't blame them for raising these issues, questions. But our issue is, does this project meet the overreaching goals efficiently and reasonably? And I see that it does, clearly, in terms of density next to transit stops, in terms of proximity to town services, town hall, the schools, the library, the city parks. So it very much meets all those goals. And we are looking at it with somewhat new eyes because we have a new master plan that focuses us on encouraging and enhancing this exact type of more massive, more dense development with the opportunity, of course, for more affordable, attainable housing. So I very much support it. I agree with the comments, break up the black, do something about the massive black. I think that's well taken. The parking, let's work that out amicably. I suffer, and I don't really think it's suffering. People are allowed to park across the street from my home in Elk Run, and it's used, and I have no particular problem with it. So these are, I find the extra 3 feet to really be fairly minor as an intrusion in other people's view plane. I do find the high ceilings to be very important for the quite small affordable housing units in their comfort and livability and enjoyment of that space. So I very much approve of the project, and maybe some required vegetation screening and lighting requirements, but I think it's headed in the right direction.
Thank you, Bernie. Michelle, comments, please.
Thank you. Bernie really stole my thunder there because that's what I was going to nail on. Just that the 2020 master plan really focuses on density over sprawl and affordable housing. I do echo everybody's concerns about the southern elevation there and just the massing. You know, this is certainly in the style of a new architecture. New architectural style is becoming more prevalent in the valley, and it's, it would be interesting to see it go to the next level. The height variation to 33 feet doesn't bother me any consideration that in the neighboring building, the solar panels exceed 30 feet. I am interested in seeing what the ultimate solar panel design is going to be and how high the solar panels will protrude, if they will, above the parapet. So that's something I'd like to see in the next go around. I'm of course curious about how the parking is going to get negotiated going forward, but I think because this is next to and in such good proximity to the much improved RAFTA services in this area, that it makes sense to me. So,
Right.
those are my comments.
Thank you, Michelle. Okay, I want to add some comments of my own, and I will start with height because that is has always been a prominent issue around here. And I was around for Harry's approval. I wasn't opposed to the height at the time. I didn't see the need for the stepping back at the time. And I have always been a proponent of density and even height for that matter. So I don't really have a problem with that. But also I don't necessarily, conversely, the need to screen the solar panels in that they are an architectural appurtenance or mechanical appurtenance and are allowed by code to be unscreened. I don't think that needs to be, doesn't need to have that. And, especially with the more modern energy codes, you're going to have a lot more ductwork with VRVs and such that you have to deal with. So the 9-foot ceilings are appreciated because you're going to have to soffit stuff down all over the place anyway. So for me, the height isn't an issue. Many things about livability and density, so I like that. Parking, that's a big one. But on the other hand, this is a private road. And as long as the building, I believe, my personal sense is, as long as the building is compliant with a number of spaces, and that all of the buildings are compliant with the number of spaces, as per the town code, then it's an HOA issue where they go and how they deal with it. Unless it becomes a town road, then it becomes our issue, but right now it's not. I do think, that the nature of the closeness of the BRT stops, making this a real TOD type project is great, but and the master plan gives us the impetus to make differences in the parking arrangement, but the code does not. So as things stand right now, we don't have the ability to make changes in that direction. So I think as long as the numbers of spaces are compliant with our code, that's our purview at the moment until we have different code to deal with. I think the first floor commercial would be nice. I like the idea of that. I like the idea of there being an equitable amount of commercial, but the thing the town needs right now in our master plan goals is density of housing. And this being at the end of the subdivision, I could see that being, getting rid of the first floor commercial is just fine for the, having more rental housing within walking distance of a BRT stop. I also want to say that I do concur with Gino on that south elevation. It's a tough one. It does look very commercial, but it does look very, it's a good way to put it, trendy with what is happening in architectural design at the moment. I don't particularly love it. I think it's not very facile. Could be better than it is without, having to lose too much square footage. But it does need some work, and the darkness of the colors, it's hard to say because I don't really know what the materials and colors are, but there was a comment I had made about the ski co-housing being Darth Vader-esque, and I would really like this not to go in that direction, so hopefully we can think of colors in a more it doesn't have to be as urbane, so it's so dark and white and gray. This is the mountains. It can be a little more fun if it needs to be. And those are my comments. I want to applaud you guys on a good project. I mean, it really is, and I do favor it for the most part.
May I just add one comment? Sorry.
No, Gino, go ahead.
Just two comments, actually. One, I want to make sure I go on. I don't mind the 33-foot change, 33-foot height at all. I think it would be an improvement for the interiors of the units. Secondly, I would just ask our client or our developer rather, to consider the likelihood of not putting those, well, dirt bather is a good word, but take those off that stairwell and see what happens to the architecture if you can actually look into the stairwells and let that perhaps be breaking up. Cost less money and it might be more effective. I don't know, but at least it's worthwhile to take a shot at it. Thank you.
Thank you, Gino. I think that's all for now. I think we need to continue this to the next meeting. What is the date for that again, please?
January 5th.
2021.
January 5th, 2021. Do we have a motion to continue to January 5th first?
So hold it. Gino's first and Eric's second? Is that what we have?
First, Eric second.
What?
You see, Gino is first, Eric is second.
Okay, just a second. Let me write that down. And I'm actually going to do this as a roll call. If you can, Bill. So if you want to call the roll.
Do we need a roll call, Susan?
Yeah, I want to do a roll call on it.
Roll call, please, Susan.
Okay, Bill Marin,
Yo.
Kyle Oberkater. Kyle, I can't pronounce your name. Can you pronounce it for me?
Oberkater. It's a silent O after the K. If that makes it easier when you look at it.
Okay, thank you. Gino Rossetti? Gino?
Gino, vote, please.
To continue, Gino. Vote to continue.
Yes.
Yes, good.
Eric Volzek?
Yes.
Michelle Tebow?
Yes.
Bernie Grauer? Bernie, turn your mic on. Okay, Rob Levitt.
Crazy, yes.
Yes.
Cindy Hirschfeld isn't here. Okay, motion carries.
Thank you all very much. Applicant, thank you very much for presenting the project to us. It was good. And let's move on to our next item, which is commissioner comments and staff updates. Staff, do you have any updates to make?
Well, I think most of the updates we have are really centered around, working on the Basalt River Park. We hold weekly meetings with Tim Belinsky and oftentimes with CCY Architects, kind of working through the development issues. Likewise, we're working on the contracts to further the work for the park. So we're hoping to start construction on the park and the road in 2021. A lot of work is going on. The planning department actually manages the Albany Park pool project, and so that is going on. If you walk by the pool, you'll see construction starting there. As you know, there's a lot of construction going on in Willett, so we have construction issues that arise. Block 11. Stedman, Taka. We've been working on block 8, which is the last block. That's the one with the fence on that you see from the highway. There's a proposal for a bank, so we're working through the plating issues on that. Stotts Mill is waiting to start construction. They're working on their letter of credit, which is kind of the last item that needs to happen before they start construction on that development. And we've got plenty of inquiries and complaints and construction issues on minor things, and we just worked through all of our holiday planning activities, and which included Santa's parade through East and West Basalt, and It included making a video, it included Zoom calls with Santa and free donuts in downtown and Willis. And believe it or not, your planning department is an active organizer on that. I think those are the major activities that we have going on. Is there anything else maybe I should mention, James?
I think that's a good list, yeah.
So we're busy, and we spend, because a lot of the approvals are administrative approvals and you don't see it, so you won't see Basalt River Park again unless they come back with a change. You know, we're really pretty busy. We don't have a lot of land use actually applications that are tied, kind of geared up to start. We are going to bring you sometime in January. We have some changes to our Public Works Manual, and we'll be bringing those to you. And then in 2021, we also have the Midland Avenue Streetscape project, but I think we need to get some of this other work kind of underway before we can kind of take on that Midland Avenue Streetscape project. So those are all kind of marching along. So that's all I have.
Do any commissioners have comments they wish to make before we adjourn?
Maybe one comment, if I may.
Yes, Gino.
Maybe someone that I think about smarter than me. We're going to obviously have these meetings for the next 3-4 months. I think COVID is going to stick with us for a while. And since we're doing that, could we, instead of having the open meeting to the public, can we not have them submit something in writing, and maybe one type written page that can be read into the meeting, rather than this belabored effort of bringing them on board, and also probably possibly running overboard in time? Would you consider it?
We'll talk to our attorney, but I think overall, I think we have to make extraordinary attempts to allow the public to speak at our meetings when we're doing them remotely. But we'll touch base with him. I mean,
part of it, it's endemic upon me, which I did not do this time, to keep people speaking briefly.
Okay.
I forget to put a rein on it when we're doing this via Zoom, and I let the first one get away from us. But the other ones, we kind of kept them within reason. But that was my fault, and I'm sorry for that.
Yeah.
So I think, other than that, if anyone has anything else to say, let's get a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
The first, any seconds? Gino first, second.
okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you all very much. You all have a good evening.
Okay, happy holidays.
Everyone.
Hi, everybody.
Thanks.
Bye. You want to see my Santa, now that we're adjourned, you want to see my Santa thing?
Yes, I want to see